Consolation for those who feel imperfect. The philosopher Montaigne was born in southwestern France in 1533. He lived in a magnificent castle, and at the age of 30, he inherited the management of his family's estate. However, he had little interest in this work, preferring to read alone upstairs. He held a famous philosophical view: knowing that you have said or done something foolish is perfectly fine, because the most important lesson we need to learn is that we are all fools. Montaigne believed that humans possess reason and consider themselves intelligent, yet sometimes we are not as happy as animals. Animals know how to care for themselves better than humans. For example, if a sheep is injured, it will find a specific herb to chew and apply to the wound. If a snake is hurt, it will also know how to heal itself. But if a human is injured, they cannot do the same. There is a story about the Greek philosopher Pyrrho, who encountered a fierce storm while traveling by ship. All the passengers panicked, fearing the fragile ship would be destroyed by the violent tides. Only one passenger remained completely calm, sitting quietly in a corner with an utterly serene expression. A pig. Can we truly say that the benefit of having reason helps reduce human suffering in life? We exalt reason to the point of believing we can dominate all things, yet with knowledge and reason, why can we still not find true peace? Reason grants humans the ability to judge and perceive, but the price for it is also very high, giving rise to conflict, doubt, anxiety, ambition, envy, deceit, infidelity, war, and so on. We need to live rationally, but if we overemphasize reason, believing that what we think is entirely correct, it can indirectly lead to suffering due to life's flaws and imperfections. For instance, obsession with an imperfect body, obsession with being less intelligent, low exam scores, lack of academic achievement, or an unremarkable career. Montaigne said that the most foolish person is one who cannot accept that they might be a fool. What does it matter to be an imperfect person? Because, after all, we are all fools. We are foolish because the physical body always has limitations and greatly influences humans, and no one can escape this heavy vessel. No matter how dignified you appear, you still have to sit on your backside, joked the philosopher. Therefore, there isn't too much difference between people. Those with flaws don't need to feel inferior. All organs in the body, from head to toe, are equally important. We don't need to try to conceal any part we're unhappy with, nor do we need to be bothered by it, for in the end, everything is just an organ of the human body. Moreover, we are also foolish because this brain overemphasizes reason and self. Thus, we overcomplicate matters when we feel ourselves to be inferior to others. For example, many parents place great importance on their children's achievements. Montaigne believed that school grades do not represent true intelligence. A person's intelligence is demonstrated through life's lessons, in tests derived from daily life's problems, not from textbooks. Human life is inherently part foolish, part wise. Therefore, if we acknowledge our weaknesses, stop being insecure about what we dislike, and stop boasting about what makes us complacent, then by living our unique half-wise, half-foolish way, we will also have a fulfilling life. Consolation for those who are sad ***. Speaking of sadness, we cannot fail to mention Schopenhauer. He was a philosopher who lived a life of suffering and loneliness, only receiving countless praises after his death. Famous figures deeply influenced by him include Nietzsche, Freud, Tolstoy, Einstein, Guide, Proust, and others. Schopenhauer was born in 1788 in a German city, now part of Poland. His childhood was both fortunate and unfortunate. His father was a wealthy and reclusive businessman, while his mother was enthusiastic and cheerful. These two different personalities often clashed. Growing up in such a family atmosphere, Schopenhauer was sensitive and melancholic from a young age. When Schopenhauer was 17, his father committed suicide, leaving him a large inheritance that ensured he would never have to work. He later studied abroad in England and France. However, during this period, he developed symptoms of depression and constantly pondered the world's sorrows, as his father's suicide cast a significant psychological shadow over him. Schopenhauer possessed incredible philosophical talent. By the age of 30, he had published his debut work, The World as Will and Representation. This book is now very famous, and anyone interested in philosophy should read it. However, that year, the book into which he poured all his heart and hopes sold only a meager 230 copies, as most people found it difficult to understand. Indeed, pioneers of thought are often lonely. His painstakingly written work eventually piled up in a warehouse, which discouraged him. Nevertheless, he continued to write. 2 years later, he taught philosophy at a university in Berlin, but his class had only 5 students, while Hegel's class next door had 300. Perhaps it was because Schopenhauer was not good at speaking and had a relatively introverted personality. He had an unfulfilled love affair, repeatedly breaking up and getting back together with a woman for 10 years. It wasn't until he was 63, with his final work, Parerga and Paralipomena **, that he became widely known. 2 years later, he became famous throughout Europe, and his previous books also unexpectedly gained recognition. Surprisingly, the book he had not held much hope for caused a strong sensation. Schopenhauer finally received the glory he should have had earlier, but by then, he had long disdained fame. He even politely declined the title of academician of the Royal Prussian Academy of Sciences. Schopenhauer spent the rest of his life living in seclusion in Frankfurt with his companion, a poodle. He lived to be 72 and never married. His attitude towards love was that love could interrupt serious work at any time, and sometimes even the greatest minds could be temporarily confused by it. It sometimes required people to sacrifice their health, sometimes their wealth, status, and happiness. He said that loving each other rarely turns out well, but why do people still want to love? It is because humans have a strong will to live. That will stems from some force demanding humans to procreate, to maintain the survival of humankind in the future. It can be seen that Schopenhauer spoke of love in a very dreary way, but his thoughts were incredibly profound. He observed that the process by which most people fall in love is actually meaningless. You lie to me, I lie to you. You are only for yourself, I am only for myself. It is this strong will to live that causes each person to act this way, repeating from generation to generation. Schopenhauer was the first pioneer of voluntarism, believing that will is superior to reason. Life is a tragedy, and desire is the source of all suffering. His philosophical ideas may seem pessimistic, but they can make people incredibly strong in their loneliness. Schopenhauer's core view on life is that it fundamentally has no value. Humans only rely on needs and illusions to keep moving. In reality, people are dedicating their lives to a meaningless existence. He said life is like a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom. When desire is not satisfied, there is pain. When desire is satisfied, boredom arises. So, faced with such a tragic, suffering-filled, and meaningless life, what should we humans do? Schopenhauer believed that a truly wise person should do this. When digging a well in the dark, we must try to turn tears into knowledge, meaning to clearly recognize the meaninglessness of human life. We need to survive and learn to do one thing: transform pain into knowledge. This is the only way to live a different life, and it was also how Schopenhauer healed his own life's sufferings. You will find that, ultimately, thought is the source of happiness. The richer your inner spiritual world, the happier you will be. Consolation for those living unsatisfying lives. The final philosopher is Nietzsche. What this philosopher offers us is healing within difficulties themselves. Nietzsche said, "For those whom I care for, I wish them suffering, solitude, sickness, maltreatment, and ignominy. I pray that they are not spared the following experiences: self-abasement, contempt for themselves, torment from a lack of self-confidence, and falling into a tragic state after failure." Nietzsche's perspective is like an upgrade of Mencius. Mencius once said, "When heaven is about to confer a great office upon a man, it first tries his will, it exercises his bones and sinews, it exposes his body to hunger, it inflicts upon him extreme poverty, and it confounds his undertakings. By all these methods, it stimulates his mind, hardens his nature, and supplies his incompetencies." For Nietzsche, pain is an indispensable ingredient for building a glorious humanity. Therefore, look at Nietzsche's most famous saying, "What does not kill you makes you stronger." This is the truth and his core argument. At the age of 21, Nietzsche visited a bookstore, and by some compelling force, he picked up and read Schopenhauer's The World as Will and Representation. From then on, he was influenced by this deceased philosopher and always believed that life was truly meaningless. But at the age of 32, Nietzsche underwent a major change. He no longer agreed with Schopenhauer's views, and thought that the theories of the man he had considered his mentor for so long were unrealistic and did not unleash life's power. This realization came from his trip to Italy, where he had never smiled so brightly and radiantly. Thus, he concluded that life was not entirely meaningless and sorrowful, and from then on, he strengthened his philosophy of the Superman, Übermensch. The Superman here is not what we see in movies, but what Nietzsche called the Superman is an ability to make life stronger. A Superman in Nietzsche's philosophy is built upon 4 archetypes: Montaigne, whom we introduced earlier, the great German genius Goethe, then Stendhal, author of The Red and the Black Asterisk, and finally the famous diplomat Cagliostro. These individuals all shared common characteristics: curiosity, a love for art, and the ability to dance and laugh even in darkness. Nietzsche believed that all suffering follows joy. Because you want to pursue joy, you must be brave enough to endure pain. He said, "Suffering and happiness are intimately linked. Whoever wishes for much of the one must experience much of the other. You can choose one of 2 paths: achieve as little joy as possible and therefore suffer little, or experience as much suffering as possible and in return enjoy joy from a rich inner life that few have attained. If you choose the first, wanting to reduce the level of life suffering, you must also reduce your capacity for human pleasure." Nietzsche also had a fondness for mountain climbing. He rented a cabin at the foot of a mountain and often climbed to the peak. He especially loved the air up there and found climbing to be a difficult but enjoyable process. It challenged people and inspired them. However, his financial situation was extremely difficult. While Schopenhauer lived worry-free with a wealthy inheritance, Nietzsche was very poor, so poor that he couldn't afford bread and almost starved to death. Nietzsche proposed to many women, but no one wanted to marry him. Later, Wagner, Nietzsche's friend, advised him to marry a rich woman, but Wagner did not know that the woman Nietzsche secretly loved was actually his own wife. Therefore, Nietzsche's romantic life was never fulfilling. In 1889, Nietzsche fell into a state of mental collapse when he saw a horse being whipped in the street. Suddenly, he ran to embrace it and cried, "I suffer too much, my brother." Afterward, he was taken to a mental asylum in Germany, cared for by his mother and sister. 11 years later, he died at the age of 55, ending his life in madness. Nietzsche's life and the core of his philosophy resonate in this one statement, which also serves as a reminder to you. To regard suffering as an opposition that must be eliminated is utterly foolish. In short, the consequences are catastrophic. It is as foolish as wanting to eliminate bad weather. In life, we will surely face difficulties, but these very difficulties will be the motivation for you to unleash your strength. Do not try to avoid all difficulties, and do not be afraid to suffer, because avoiding it also means you are avoiding all opportunities for your life's vitality to shine. These are the stories of 6 philosophers. It is difficult to fully grasp their thoughts and philosophical views through this short text. What I hope is that these philosophical ideas can inspire you a little, make you feel their interest, and receive helpful guidance. Who do you like? From whom do you find healing? What should you do next to deepen your thoughts and enrich your inner world? If you have this desire, you can certainly read more books about that philosopher. Ultimately, you will see that philosophy is not just a comfort, a healing, but above all, it is the wisdom and sagacity of life. It allows you to face all difficulties, shortcomings, dissatisfactions, and even the sufferings and wounds within you. These are precisely the opportunities that allow you to discover your inner strength through wisdom.